Imagine the scene. A house in shadows, the walls breathing a silence heavier than any scream.
Outside, everything seems normal. Cars passing by, distant voices, life continuing with indifference. But inside something happens that no one sees. The air is thick, the floor creaks as if hiding secrets, and every shadow seems to have eyes. There is a strange sensation, as if something invisible slid through the cracks, watching, lurking, waiting. There are no knocks, no noise, but the threat is there, latent like a knife that never stabs but whose presence freezes the blood. The clocks move forward, but here inside time is broken. Each minute repeats itself, identical, endless, like a cyclical torture that no one names. The heart beats faster, for no apparent reason, as if it senses a danger it cannot explain. And the disturbing part is not what is heard, but what is not heard. The absence of a voice, the lack of a gesture, the emptiness of a warmth that should be there but isn't. The mystery is not what happens, but what is missing. And in that emptiness, where nothing happens, is where everything really does. Imagine that child, sitting in silence, waiting for a hug that never comes. Now stop and think. What happens when the years pass, and that waiting is never resolved? That emptiness doesn't disappear, it doesn't evaporate with age. It becomes an invisible wound that continues to ooze in adulthood. And that wound seeks relief, seeks anesthesia, seeks anything to cover the echo of that unbearable silence. Here is where the story twists. What from the outside looks like simple excess, what so many call weakness or lack of character, is in reality a survival code. We're not talking about pleasure. We're talking about a desperate fight against a pain that was never named. Alcohol, drugs, food, work, screens. They are not whims. They are momentary shelters from a fire that started in childhood and still burns in the deepest part. Gabor Maté lays it out with brutal clarity. Behind every addiction there isn't a blind desire, but a question that no one knew how to answer in childhood. A question that hurts. Am I worthy of love? Am I enough? Does anyone see me? The vice is the clumsy, compulsive answer to that absence of connection. And the most disturbing part is that the same armor that protects also condemns. Because it not only hides the pain, it also feeds the shame. Trauma is not only what happened, but what didn't happen. It's not only the violence, but the lack. The lack of care, the lack of validation, the lack of a safe space where a child could cry without fear, express without being judged, exist without feeling like a burden. That is the seed of disconnection. And disconnection is the fertile ground where compulsion flourishes. The result is an adult who functions, who fulfills, who appears normal, but who at night, when the silence returns, feels again the same cold as that child in his room. An adult who runs toward anything that gives a moment of relief, even if they know it will slowly destroy them. Because the problem was never the substance or the behavior, but that childhood wound that remains open, crying out to be recognized. That adult, trapped in the appearance of normality, does not recognize themselves in the mirror because what they see are layers of armor they never chose. And those armors, built with the rigidity of shame, have a price: disconnection from oneself. It's not only about not knowing who they are, but not being able to feel what truly beats within. Why? Because every authentic emotion was turned into a threat in childhood. Anger wasn't allowed, sadness was punished, vulnerability was ignored. So the only thing left was to repress, hide, disguise. And now, every time life falls silent, that same invisible threat arises, forcing them to flee to any distraction. Here lies the paradox. Compulsion doesn't come from seeking pleasure. It comes from fleeing pain. But that escape never reaches its goal, because what it chases is not outside, but inside. Endless work, the phone glued to the hand, hours on social media, impulsive shopping, even toxic relationships, all serve the same function: to anesthetize the echo of a wound no one healed. And though for a moment it seems to work, afterward comes the crash, the deeper emptiness, the confirmation of that voice whispering, "You are not enough." The disturbing thing is that the more they try to escape, the stronger the cycle becomes. Because the mind, programmed by years of absence, repeats the same narrative. I must hide what I feel. I must survive no matter what. I must pretend nothing is happening. And so life becomes a theater where every smile is a mask, and every success is a desperate attempt to cover what burns inside. What no one sees is that behind every achievement, behind every moment of shine, hides a shadow still asking for the same thing as always: connection. And here arises the cruelest trap. Trauma doesn't just leave scars, it implants poisonous ideas. The conviction of being defective, of not deserving love, of being an unbearable burden. That narrative repeats like a silent mantra, fueling compulsion, reinforcing shame, condemning the person to live trapped in a circle that seems impossible to break. Because no matter how much they try to give up the substance or the behavior, the problem was never that substance or that behavior. The problem was always disconnection. And what's frightening, what chills the blood, is that disconnection is not only inherited, it is also transmitted. Every child who grows up in an environment incapable of holding their emotions repeats the same story, carrying wounds that weren't theirs and passing them to the next generation. It is an endless echo, an ancestral cry that no one hears because everyone is too busy anesthetizing themselves in their own way. And so, pain disguises itself as family inheritance, as if it were an inevitable destiny. But what no one says, what almost no one dares to face, is that the cycle can be broken. And breaking it doesn't mean willpower or heroism, it means the opposite: lowering the guard, tearing down defenses, daring to feel what you've buried since childhood. Because the true cure is not in fighting the symptom, but in embracing the wound. Not in eradicating the behavior, but in listening to what that behavior screams in silence. What is missing is not discipline. What is missing is compassion. And the irony is that the compassion that frightens most is the one you must offer yourself. So what would happen if, for a moment, you stopped running? What would happen if, instead of covering the wound, you faced it? It wouldn't be easy. It would hurt like a fire that devours everything it finds. But that fire is the only thing capable of lighting the way back to you. Because the way out was never external. The way out was always in what you feared most: recovering the lost bond with yourself. And in that reunion, even if late, lies the seed of true freedom. That freedom we speak of is not the one sold by bright billboards, nor promised by pocket-sized gurus. It is a freedom that terrifies because it demands facing what you've most avoided: your own pain. And here's where most stumble, because the mind clings to the idea that healing means eliminating discomfort, erasing memories, pretending nothing happened. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Healing means remembering with the body what you tried to forget with the mind. It is allowing the trembling to return, the tears to fall, the contained rage to explode, and still remain there without running, without seeking quick anesthesia. The strange thing is that when that door opens, the first thing that appears is not relief, but chaos. It is like entering a room closed for decades. Dust rises, the air becomes unbreathable, forgotten objects seem like monsters. And yet, it is in that very chaos where the opportunity for integration hides. Because every memory, every repressed sensation is not an enemy. It is a part of you waiting to be acknowledged. The problem was never the emotion. The problem was the exile. Sadness doesn't destroy. What destroys is the silence that suffocates it. And here comes another unsettling revelation. What we call personality is in many cases nothing more than a mosaic of defenses built against a primitive pain. That habit of pleasing, that obsession with control, that need to appear strong, are just costumes sewn from scars. They become identities, labels, roles we play day after day until we forget we are not those roles. And when someone tries to tear off those masks, we panic, because without them we believe we don't exist. What is unknown is that behind that mask there is not emptiness, but the essence that was buried. The question is, how do you recover what has been buried for so long? There are no magic formulas, but there is a key: connection. Connection with yourself, with your emotions, with your body, with that child who was once silenced. Connection with others, with looks that don't judge, with embraces that don't condition, with spaces where there's no need to pretend. Because if trauma was born of disconnection, the cure can only be born of reunion. And here lies the most powerful truth. It's not about becoming invulnerable, but about accepting vulnerability as the fertile ground where true strength grows. The striking thing is that when someone dares to cross that threshold, life changes its tone entirely. It is no longer about running to escape, but walking to inhabit. It is no longer about hiding the wound, but showing it without shame. Because what once was a sign of weakness becomes the deepest symbol of humanity. And in that gesture, something almost miraculous happens. What once chained now liberates. Because the wound ceases to be a prison and becomes a bridge to yourself and to others. The most brutal irony is that what seemed like the end, the unbearable pain, the void that felt like a sentence, is in reality the beginning. It is not the wound that destroys you, it is the rejection of that wound that keeps you chained. Repressed pain is a cruel jailer, but embraced pain becomes a teacher. And when you finally listen to it, when you finally hold it, what you discover is not destruction, but integration. Because what was broken didn't need to disappear, it needed to become part of you again. And it is at that point, just when you begin to see that what you called weakness can transform into power, when everything takes on an unsettling meaning. You were not created to live anesthetized, nor to escape, nor to hide behind habits that wear you down. You were created to walk through the storm and come out the other side with the certainty that what you feared most was, in fact, the key to your own freedom. What seemed like a sentence becomes a kind of initiation, a secret door to a state of consciousness where you are no longer a slave to what they did to you or what you believed you were. And now that we've made it this far, before we continue, I want to present the following to you. Our book, The Formula of Awakening, is now available. Do you feel like there's something inside you that wants to awaken, but you don't know where to start? Then I invite you to transform your way of thinking, and with it, your way of living. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to get the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Grab your copy now at a great price. With that said, let's continue with the video. The surprising thing is that when someone reaches that place, what once hurt to the core becomes a transformed memory. The wound no longer burns, now it illuminates. The emptiness no longer suffocates, now it opens space. And that feeling is so strange, so new, that at first you don't know how to inhabit it. but there is the proof that the circle can be broken, that pain was not the end of the story, but the beginning of another narrative you can write yourself. And here is what I want to leave engraved in your mind. It's not about erasing what happened, nor inventing a different past. It's about holding what was, giving it a place, acknowledging it without fear. Because when you embrace that shadow, you not only stop fighting it, you also strip it of the power to keep chasing you. What yesterday was a chain, tomorrow can be a root. What yesterday was silence, tomorrow can be voice. And what yesterday seemed like death, tomorrow can be true birth. Now tell me, how much longer are you going to let the echo of your wound write your story? When will you start writing it yourself? I want you to think about it, but above all, I want you to feel it. And if this journey you just heard stirred you, if at some point you felt a shiver in your body, or a spark in your chest, then subscribe, because this is only the beginning. Leave in the comments a phrase that resonates with you, any word, any truth you want to leave marked here, because sometimes a single shared phrase is enough to ignite someone else still trapped in the dark. And now I say goodbye, but not as you imagine, not with a goodbye, not with a see you later. I say goodbye with a silence. Yes, a silence like the one at the beginning, but this time different. A silence that doesn't hurt, a silence that opens space, a silence that invites you to listen to yourself. Stay with that silence, because right there begins everything you were searching for.